John Thune, chairman of the Senate Republican Conference. Senator, it's nice to see you tonight, and good evening to you.
Nice to see you, Bill. Thank you.
The Senate's set to leave town. In what condition do you depart?
Well, the one thing I think you have to say is that Senate Republicans are an entrepreneurial group. There's nothing monolithic about the discussions we're having. We have an abundance of ideas. We're vetting those. We're having these very, I think, spirited and frank discussions within our conference, knowing that full well we're going to have to pass a bill with Republican votes. So we're coming together. It's getting closer. We're narrowing the differences, and on the way out of town, I think there'll be things that we can submit to the CBO to get scored.
Okay, and possibly that is tomorrow. Do you rate today as a speed bump or a wall?
No, I think it was a speed bump, and I've described this all along as 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. It is a very, very difficult, complicated task with lots of moving parts. But what we know is that we've got to get to yes eventually. And clearly right now we're having discussions within our conference, and individual members are trying to move the bill in a certain direction, and other members are trying to move it in another direction. But eventually you have to find the balance. You've got to find that sweet spot where everybody comes together and we get the consensus. Because if we fail, we're giving the American people, or allowing them to stay in a failed system that is collapsing very rapidly.
In the meantime, you allowed Democrats to tee off on you, and Senator Dianne Feinstein did just that today when she said this.
Once we begin to let it happen, that a small group of men in a back room can write a bill and move a bill through that affects every American and 1/6 of our economy without a hearing, without knowledge, without members knowing what's in that bill. This country's in trouble if that's the way we legislate.
It sounds like Republicans from 8 years ago, a lot of the same criticisms there. How do you
Well, look,
respond to that?
one of the things we know is that we've had now 7 or 8 years to examine the failures of Obamacare. You've got this collapse in markets. You have 1/3 of the counties in the country that have one or no options in the exchanges. You've seen premiums spike in the last 4 years by 105% on average. My state of South Dakota, 124%. Out-of-pocket costs are going through the roof for people in this country. It's a failed system. We know what the issues are, and we've had all Republican senators involved in this. Now, it would be great if some of these Democrats were willing to help, but they made it very clear early on they didn't want to have anything to do with the bill that repealed and replaced Obamacare. And, their idea, the only idea they've submitted so far, is the Bernie Sanders proposal, which is a single payer. And that's ultimately where the Democrats want to go. And that's a $6.6 trillion plan.
Are you about to pull Democrats into this process, or are you there?
I think we're going to get there. And I don't think that if we have to negotiate with Chuck Schumer and the Democrats, we're going to be looking down the barrel of a single payer system, because that's what they want to see happen.
8 years ago it wasn't easy for Democrats. They hammered away day after day for weeks at a time. Is the Republican majority prepared to come back from this holiday break and do the same in the midst of this, what could be a very long, hot summer?
I think we are, and there's a will to do that. Again, we have, differences which I think you could say started out to be somewhat significant, but they're narrowing. We're getting closer, and every day that passes, we're a day closer, I think, to getting a result. And what the American people want out of this is they want a result. They want to see us fix this failed system and this mess that the Democrats created. And we have an opportunity, and frankly, an obligation to do that. We made a commitment to the American people. And so we've got to get 50 Republican senators on board.
You mentioned the CBO. Will there be news on that tomorrow in terms of scoring or telling the American people how much different aspects of the bill will cost in a revision?
I think there will be various proposals, pieces submitted to the CBO to get their feedback and what the impacts are going to be, both with respect to coverages and costs and that sort of thing. But that'll be an iterative process. I don't think it's all going to happen overnight. We've got a week now where the Senate's out of session. We come back week after next. I think it's going to be time for us to move forward and to vote.
So we should not expect a major headline tomorrow. We are where we are.
Right. I think that's right. I think you're going to see incremental progress and an opportunity again to get feedback from CBO as we twist and turn some of these dials and try and come up with a bill that we can get 50 votes for.
In a political sense, what do you think of a Republican majority in the House, a Republican majority in the Senate, Republican in the White House? You have revolutionaries on both sides of Congress, and how you lasso them or get them to buy into the rest of the majority is a big challenge. And I think the American people are watching this, and they're trying to to figure out whether or not you can govern.
Right.
How prominent is that discussion with you and your colleagues now?
Well, it's very prominent because I think failure to me is not an option. I mean, I think it's awfully difficult to explain to the American people, and I also think that if we fail, this is destined to go over the cliff, and we've got to rescue the American people from a failed system and prevent the alternative, which would be a single payer. This is probably our last-ditch effort at free market health care in this country, and I hope we can succeed.
You know, distractions can make it difficult to govern. The President's tweets earlier today, do you consider that a distraction, or how do you view that?
Well, I think, you know, at least in terms of the work we were doing, I had a Commerce Committee markup today on the FAA reauthorization. We had meetings on health care, so we're continuing to do our work, but it's certainly not helppful, and it's not presidential. The President needs to stay focused. We've got an agenda.
Have you reached out to the White House to express that?
I haven't reached out specifically with this latest tweet, but I think the White House is fully aware of what many of us think in terms of the use of social media. And I think the President, I'd like to see him confine it to talking about the issues that the American people care about in his agenda, which is jobs and the economy and tax reform and infrastructure and health care reform.
We just heard from the White House saying the media is going after him every day. Is there truth to that?
Well, I don't think there's any question that there's truth to that. And some of these shows are very, very critical and in many ways disrespectful of the position, the White House, and the President himself. And so, you know, I understand his desire to retaliate, but I think he's the President of the United States. And I think, you know, people expect him to be measured, to have a thick skin, to take some of these shots. And if you respond in a way that deals with the issue or the difference that you have in policy, but don't make it personal.
We're going to talk more about this in the panel coming up. Senator, thank you for your time.
Great to be with you.
John
Thanks, Bill.
Thune from South Dakota. You bet.